The coffee shop comeback. How I rebuilt when my partner tried to take everything. The email arrived between the morning rush and lunch crowd at my coffee shop. I'm moving to Portland with Amber. Already transferred our business account to my personal one. Don't bother calling. It's over. My hands didn't shake as I read it. My voice didn't waver as I handed Mrs. Jenkins her usual oat milk latte. The only sign that my business partner and boyfriend of 8 years had just torpedoed our relationship via email was a slight tightening around my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Jenkins left, cradling her drink in our signature recycled cups before typing my response. Good luck. My name is Maya, and at 36 I just received what most would consider a devastating blow. But while Jason was probably gloating over his dramatic exit, imagining me in tears over his betrayal, I was calmly prepping for the lunch crowd at Grounded, the coffee shop we'd supposedly built together. The signs had been there for months. The business trips to Portland that never resulted in supplier contracts. The sudden password changes on his phone. The way he'd started wearing flannel shirts and growing a beard, trying desperately to embrace Portland's hipster aesthetic before even moving there. 3 months ago, I'd found a receipt for dinner for 2 at an upscale farm-to-table restaurant on a night he'd claimed to be meeting with a coffee bean supplier. That same evening, I'd opened a separate bank account at a different bank. A week later, when he mentioned wanting to consolidate our accounts to streamline our finances, I'd agreed cheerfully while quietly transferring most of our profits to my new account. The business account he'd just emptied contained just enough to keep him from getting suspicious, about 6 weeks' worth of regular deposits. The rest was safely tucked away, along with detailed records of every suspicious transaction he'd made over the past year. My phone buzzed again. Don't bother trying to salvage the shop. Amber and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my espresso machines later. Amber. The barista we'd hired 8 months ago. I'd watched her laugh too loud at Jason's coffee puns, noticed how she'd touch his arm when she thought I wasn't looking. She was 11 years his junior, young enough to be impressed by his stories of almost getting into Y Combinator and naive enough to think his French press technique was revolutionary. I didn't respond to his text. Instead, I called my lawyer, the one I'd consulted 2 months ago when I'd found the Portland Airbnb charges on our business credit card. It's time, I said simply. He just made his move. The papers are ready, she replied. I'll file them first thing tomorrow. Do you want me to have him served in Portland? No rush. Let him think he's won first. Another email from Jason. I know this must be hard for you. You're not exactly in your prime startup years anymore. At least you have your baking hobby to fall back on. My baking hobby, the artisanal pastry line that had tripled our revenue when I introduced it 3 years ago. The one whose profits I'd carefully documented as separate from our original business model. The one that had been featured in Food and Wine last year while Jason was busy trying to develop a revolutionary coffee app that never materialized. I smiled, thinking of the certified letters that would greet him in Portland. Let him enjoy his moment of triumph. I spent that evening in our commercial kitchen. My kitchen, since I'd leased it under my name and kept it separate from our coffee shop operations despite Jason's repeated suggestions to combine everything under one LLC. Another lucky instinct that had paid off. While organizing the paperwork my lawyer would need, I found a photo of Jason and me at our grand opening. He looked so different then, before his midlife crisis had turned him into a walking Portland stereotype. These days, he wore beanies regardless of the weather, tried too hard to one-up the college students who frequented our shop, and used terms like fourth-wave coffee culture that sounded ridiculous coming from a man of 41. My phone kept buzzing with emails, each one more condescending than the last. I've been planning this for months. Amber appreciates my coffee vision in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll meet a nice accountant more your speed. Already told my podcast listeners we grew apart creatively. It's nobody's fault, really. I screenshotted each message, adding them to my evidence folder. Let him dig his hole deeper. My lawyer would love his casual admission of premeditation, his gleeful announcement about emptying our account. The last email caught my attention. By the way, I used the business card to book our flights and first month's apartment rental. Consider it my severance package, lol. Perfect. I called the credit card company. Ms. Rodriguez speaking. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges? 2 one-way tickets to Portland booked today, Airbnb charges in the Pearl District, and I'll need to remove my business partner as an authorized user. Do you have documentation of the fraud? Emails from my partner admitting he used our business card to book travel with his girlfriend after emptying our bank account. I'll be happy to forward them. The representative's professional tone couldn't quite hide her satisfaction as she canceled the charges. Jason and Amber would arrive at the airport tomorrow to find their tickets invalidated, their housing reservation canceled. My phone buzzed again. Don't worry about the shop space. I'll let you keep working there until you find something smaller. I actually laughed out loud at that one. Did he really think he had any claim to the building that I'd leased in my name? Had his ego grown so large that he'd forgotten whose signature was on the rental agreement? It's another buzz, and I know the pastry business means a lot to you. We can work out a fair payment for your recipes. My recipes. That I developed myself. Tested myself. Marketed myself. While he complained about the kitchen taking up space that could be used for his never-materialized coffee education center. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. Tomorrow, Jason would learn some hard truths about business law and separate assets. But tonight, I'd enjoy the quiet and plan my next chapter. Morning brought a flurry of increasingly angry texts from Jason. WTF did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The Airbnb host canceled our reservation. Answer me. I silenced my phone and headed to the coffee shop. Saturday was always our busiest day, and I had a new batch of bourbon pecan sticky buns to put in the oven. Life goes on, even when your business partner runs off with a barista young enough to be his intern. Around noon, his mother called. Maya, dear, Jason told us everything. About how controlling you've been with the business, how you drove him away. He says you're being vindictive now, causing problems with his travel plans. I put her on speaker while I prepared a cold brew. Did he mention emptying our business account and charging tickets for him and his girlfriend on our company credit card? Silence. Then, well, he said you left him no choice, that you've been cold and distant. Barbara, I have his emails. Would you like me to read them to you? The one where he bragged about taking our money, or maybe the one where he mocked my age? Another pause. He did seem a bit cruel. I told him that email was inappropriate. I appreciate the call, Barbara. I've always liked you, but I think it's best if we end this conversation now. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Jason during the proceedings. Proceedings? Already? Goodbye, Maya. By late afternoon, Jason's sister Megan was spreading family gossip through mutual friends. Apparently, Jason and Amber were stuck at a Motel 6 near the airport, their Portland dreams temporarily derailed. He tried using his personal credit cards, but those had been maxed out for months, another red flag I'd noticed. My lawyer called with an update. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given his admission of emptying the joint account and the documented credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze all remaining assets. Has he been served yet? Not yet, but he'll get the papers at his new Motel 6 address. Speaking of which, his girlfriend's Instagram is providing excellent evidence. She's been posting about their PNW adventure all day, including some choice comments about you and your basic baking. I smiled, thinking of my own documentation, a year's worth of suspicious charges, Airbnb receipts, emails that proved premeditation. Jason had been so focused on his grand escape that he'd never considered I might be watching, waiting, preparing. My phone buzzed with another text. You think you're so smart, but I made copies of all the pastry recipes and client lists. Half that business is mine. I forwarded the text to my lawyer, adding it to the growing file of Jason's mistakes. Let him learn the hard way about intellectual property and business ownership. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being prepared. The emergency hearing on Monday was everything I could have hoped for. Jason showed up in his new Portland-ready wardrobe, skinny jeans too tight for his frame, a beanie despite the 85-degree weather, and a plaid shirt that screamed, "I'm trying too hard." Amber waited outside, her youth painfully obvious under the harsh courthouse lighting. My lawyer presented our evidence methodically. Jason's gleeful email about emptying our account, his credit card fraud, his documented history of hidden expenses, each piece carefully collected over months of quiet observation. Your Honor, Jason's hastily hired lawyer attempted, my client admits to some rash decisions, but Ms. Rodriguez's actions have been vindictive and calculating. Calculating, my lawyer countered. You mean prudent. My client protected her separate assets and maintained detailed records of her partner's suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive, that's smart business. The judge reviewed my documentation, the separate lease agreement for the kitchen, the pastry business's incorporation papers in my name only, the careful separation of business and personal finances that Jason had always complained about. Mr. Wallace, the judge addressed Jason directly, you admitted via email to deliberately emptying a business account and using company credit cards to fund a trip with your employee. Do you deny this? Jason shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to make a clean break. By committing financial fraud? The judge raised an eyebrow. And now you're claiming rights to property that documentation shows is clearly separate from joint business assets? The recipes were developed during our partnership, Jason's lawyer tried again. The pastry line was established as a separate LLC, my lawyer interrupted. And Ms. Rodriguez maintains strict separation of finances throughout. We have documentation of every investment and return. I watched Jason's face as reality started sinking in. He thought this would be easy, empty our accounts, run off with his barista, maybe claim half my recipes in the dissolution. He'd never bothered to understand my insistence on keeping things separate, had mocked my careful bookkeeping as corporate thinking that was stifling our creative coffee culture. The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, the judge announced. All shared assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Wallace is ordered to return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone, Jason protested. We spend it on. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it, the judge cut him off. And Mr. Wallace, the court takes a very dim view of using business credit cards to fund adventures with employees. Outside the courthouse, I heard Amber asking Jason about their Portland plans. His response was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently across the marble floor, heading back to the business he'd never truly respected. The next few weeks brought a string of increasingly desperate moves from Jason. He tried claiming the pastry line had been his idea. He remembered investing money in its early development. He even suggested he'd been my recipe tester all along, claims quickly disproven by my meticulous records. "He's getting desperate," my lawyer observed. His girlfriend's Instagram shows they're staying at her parents' basement apartment now. Apparently, barista wages aren't quite the financial cushion he imagined. Jason's family started reaching out, their tone markedly different from their initial accusations. "We had no idea," his sister Megan admitted. "He told us you've been cold, controlling, that he needed creative freedom. But then we saw his emails, the way he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew." His mother called again, this time in tears. "The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger. I raised him better than that. I thought I did anyway. I let their calls go to voicemail. Their support might have meant something weeks ago, but now it felt like rats deserting a sinking ship." Coffee shop thrived, ironically boosted by local gossip about my situation. Customers started coming in specifically to show support, often leaving with far more pastries than they'd planned to buy. "My ex tried something similar," one customer confided while buying a dozen bourbon pecan sticky buns. "Thought he'd take everything in the divorce. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them." My phone still buzzed occasionally with texts from Jason, his tone swinging between anger and manipulation. "You've ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. You'll regret being so vindictive. Can't we work something out?" Those recipes would be nothing without my coffee pairing suggestions. I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding. Let him dig his hole deeper. Through the grapevine, I heard Amber was having second thoughts. Apparently, sharing her parents' basement apartment with a middle-aged man who couldn't afford his own place wasn't the bohemian Portland dream she'd imagined. The age gap that had seemed exciting during secret coffee tastings felt different in the harsh light of reality. She posted about toxic relationships and finding yourself in your 20s yesterday, my lawyer mentioned during an update call, and removed her in a relationship status this morning. I almost felt sorry for Jason. Almost. But then I remembered his LOL after telling me he'd emptied our account. The casual cruelty of his comments about my age. The way he'd assumed I'd be helpless without his coffee expertise. Instead of pity, I felt something else, pride. Pride in my foresight, in my quiet strength, in my ability to protect myself while he underestimated me. The final business dissolution hearing painted a very different picture from Jason's imagined triumph. Gone was his cocky attitude, replaced by barely concealed panic. Amber was noticeably absent. She'd moved on to a craft brewer her own age, according to Instagram. Jason had shown up in his old clothes. The Portland-ready wardrobe apparently returned to help repay the business account he'd emptied. His lawyer looked tired, probably from trying to find loopholes in my documented separation of assets. "Your Honor," Jason's lawyer attempted one last time, "despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed to the growth of his partner's pastry business through creative consultation and—" "Creative consultation?" my lawyer interrupted. "Like these emails belittling Ms. Rodriguez's business as a baking hobby? Or these Instagram posts calling it her side hustle?" The judge had clearly seen enough. The final settlement reflected my careful planning. I kept my kitchen lease, my pastry business, and my separate assets. Jason got his personal possessions and his car, which was worth less than he owed on it. "You've destroyed me," he hissed as we left the courthouse. "I'll have to move back in with my parents." "No, Jason, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too." His mother was waiting outside, ready to drive him to her house, his new home at 41. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd mocked my age was now living in his childhood bedroom while I continued running my successful business. "You planned this all along," he accused. "You knew this would happen." "No, I just paid attention. And unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records." His mother stepped between us. "That's enough, Jason. You've embarrassed yourself enough already." As they walked away, I heard her start in on him. "Honestly, what were you thinking? A 24-year-old? Emptying bank accounts? Sending those horrible emails?" I watched them disappear into the parking lot, feeling nothing but relief. Jason had thought he was writing the ending to our story with that cruel email. Instead, he'd merely set my carefully laid plans in motion. Six months after the business dissolution was finalized, my pastry line had expanded to 3 local grocery chains. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Jason struggled to rebuild his life, the baking hobby he'd dismissed was thriving. I'd hired 5 new employees and launched an online store that was gaining traction nationally. We'd been featured in Bon Appetit magazine with a spread on our bourbon pecan sticky buns. News of Jason's situation trickled back through mutual acquaintances. He'd tried dating apps but found women his age weren't interested in a middle-aged man living with his parents. Younger women, having heard about his history through coffee shop gossip, steered clear. Amber had apparently warned her friends about him, sharing screenshots of his desperate attempts to win her back after she'd left. His career suffered too. When he tried to get barista jobs at other local coffee shops, his reputation preceded him. No one wanted to hire a man with a history of emptying business accounts and running off with employees. He tried to claim age discrimination, according to his sister Megan during an unexpected visit to my shop. "Said they were punishing him for dating someone younger," she told me, sampling our newest creation, a lavender honey scone. HR just added that complaint to his file. I was surprised to see his sister in my store, but her presence spoke volumes about how thoroughly Jason had alienated his own family. "I know we didn't support you at first," she admitted, running her fingers over our signature recycled coffee sleeves. He played the victim so well. But watching how he handled everything, how he acted afterward, I'm ashamed we ever believed him. My lawyer kept me updated on Jason's continued attempts to challenge the business dissolution. His petition was denied. His claim of unfair distribution dismissed based on the evidence of his own actions. He actually tried arguing that his LOL about emptying the account was just a joke, she told me, laughing. The judge asked if LOL made theft less illegal. Pastry line's success brought unexpected validation. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story, not as a scorned partner but as a savvy entrepreneur who had protected her interests. Young business owners asked for advice about keeping business and personal finances separate. "The best protection is preparation," I told one young woman who reminded me of Amber. "And always trust your instincts." Jason's mother called occasionally, usually after he'd done something particularly self-destructive. He'd tried cryptocurrency investing, hoping for a quick fix to his financial problems. He'd gotten involved with a drop-shipping scheme that promised fast returns. Each attempt to recover his former lifestyle just dug him deeper into trouble. "I don't know where we went wrong with him," she sighed during one call. "His father and I offered to help him get back on his feet if he'd just take responsibility for his actions. But he's still blaming everyone else, you, Amber, the judge, the rigged system." I listened politely but maintained my distance. Their family drama wasn't my problem anymore. My life had moved forward, filled with plans for a retail storefront and a possible cookbook deal. The only reminder of Jason's impact on my life was a framed screenshot hanging in my office, his final email before I blocked him. "Have fun with your baking hobby. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." Below it sat my latest business award, proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. 1 year after the dissolution, I hosted a grand opening for my first standalone bakery. The event attracted local media, and the story they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed partnership. It was about a successful entrepreneur expanding her brand. Jason's betrayal had become a mere footnote in my success story. During the event, Amber unexpectedly walked in. She looked younger than ever, or maybe I just felt that much stronger. She shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse like a shield. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I believed everything he told me about how you were cold, controlling, how you didn't support his vision. Then I watched him try the same manipulation tactics on me when things got tough." I continued arranging a display of pastries. "Those weren't visions, Amber. They were fantasies. There's a difference." "I know that now," she paused, then added, "He tried to move in when you froze the accounts. Thought my parents' basement would be temporary. After 2 weeks of him complaining about the Wi-Fi speed and suggesting I ask my parents for a loan for a better place, I understood what you meant about the difference between visions and fantasies." I actually laughed at that. "Let me guess, he had big plans but no way to fund them?" "Exactly. Everything was going to work out once his coffee app got funding, once his podcast went viral, once his NFTs definitely increased in value." She shook her head. "I'm dating someone my own age now. We have student loans and a small apartment, but at least we're building something real." After she left, my head pastry chef whispered, "Was that the girlfriend?" "No," I replied. "That was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did." Speaking of lessons, I gestured to a young couple examining our pastry case. "Let's talk about your idea for the seasonal menu." The bakery had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of independence, of resilience, of the power of preparation. Young entrepreneurs often sought my advice, and I always emphasized the importance of protecting their assets. Jason's mother called one last time, not to discuss Jason, but to thank me. "You taught our family an important lesson," she said, "about enabling bad behavior, about making excuses for cruelty." Jason's still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems, but we're not defending him anymore. That's your legacy to our family, showing us the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. I thought about that legacy as I reviewed plans for a second location. Jason had intended to diminish me, to trade me in for a younger model and take half of everything I'd built. Instead, he'd inadvertently pushed me to become even stronger, more successful. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Jason filed another petition to revisit the settlement. Judge dismissed it immediately and ordered him to pay court costs. "Thought you'd enjoy that." I smiled, thinking of him in his childhood bedroom, still trying to rewrite an ending that had been determined the moment he underestimated me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. 2 years after Jason's cruel email, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business conference. The topic wasn't betrayal or dissolution, it was about building and protecting a successful business. My story had evolved from cautionary tale to inspiration. During the Q&A session, a woman asked about keeping business and personal finances separate. My partner says I'm being paranoid that partnership means sharing everything. My ex-partner said the same thing, I replied, right up until he tried to claim half my business in our dissolution. Trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia. The bakery chain had grown to 4 locations, each more successful than the last. The baking hobby Jason had mocked now employed 40 people and had been featured in several national magazines. Through mutual friends, I heard Jason had finally moved out of his parents' house into a small apartment above a garage. He'd had to take a barista job at a chain coffee shop after his attempts at becoming a coffee influencer failed to generate income. His dating profile still listed him as a visionary in the specialty coffee space, though his profile photo was clearly outdated. Amber, ironically, had become a regular customer at my original location. She'd earned her business degree and started her own graphic design company. "You inspired me," she told me once, showing how a woman can build something lasting instead of falling for empty promises. I kept Jason's cruel email framed in my office, not as a reminder of pain but as proof of how far I'd come. Below it hung a sign that read, "Success is the best revenge." The 5-year anniversary celebration of my original bakery, I stood addressing my employees and loyal customers. The space had been transformed from a single coffee shop into the flagship store of a thriving culinary empire. Jason's mother attended, though I hadn't sent her an invitation. She waited until the crowd thinned to approach me. "I saw Jason yesterday," she said, smoothing her dress, one she'd bought from a boutique next to my newest bakery location. "He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had. He still doesn't understand that he didn't lose everything in the dissolution. He threw it away." I thought about that email. His casual cruelty, his assumption that I would crumble without him, how he'd expected me to beg, to break, to prove him right about my desperation. Instead, I'd built something stronger than before. Each new bakery location was a testament to what happens when you stop dimming your light for insecure men. The young pastry chef I'd hired last month, coincidentally also named Amber, came over with a question about our new bourbon caramel apple tarts. As I explained the process, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the bakery window. I saw what Jason had failed to see 5 years ago, not a woman getting older, but one getting wiser, stronger, more successful. His cruel email had meant to be an ending. Instead, it had been a beginning. Not just for me, but for every woman who heard my story and realized she deserved better than someone else's midlife crisis.